This video is to help you organize all of your study materials to start preparing for your final exam. You will need a few things in front of you to start. The first is a plain manila folder. The second is your Unit 2 final exam study guide. This is going to be your best friend as you prepare for your final exam. And then you're also going to need your binder with all of your handouts and your assessments from the unit. So I'm going to be passing back some graded problem sets, some exit tickets, and some assessments as you're doing this. But what you're going to try to do is find and locate all of your materials in your binder for class today. There'll be a binder check next class, but I'll talk more about that later. So for now, we're just organizing all of your study materials. First thing that I would like you to do is just label your folder. Okay, so in college, when you have big finals, or even for the rest of your high school, as you have big finals, it's a really good strategy just to put everything you need to study in one location. This way, whenever you're like getting ready to in tutorial or after school to sit down and study, you just have everything in one place, like all of the things that you need to know cold for the final. This is a really helpful strategy for me. The first thing I would like you to have in your folder, like whenever you open it, is you should always be seeing your study guide first. In this study guide, the first page is kind of like a study checklist. This looks super overwhelming at first, but keep in mind you have 2 weeks to go through and complete all these things, and we'll be doing some of them in class. Today we're going to, right now you're completing the first thing, which is organizing your study folder according to the video directions. So you can go ahead and check that off since you're doing it right now. Few pages you'll have time to go back and do this on your own or later in class today. For now, I want you to focus on on page 5. You have an area where you can start organizing like key formulas for your cheat sheet, and I'll give you some ideas of what to put on there in a second. The majority of what we're focusing on today starts on page 6, and it's key concepts. So the basic idea here is we're thinking of the main key concept of a unit circle problem, and then we're looking back at an assessment or a handout on the unit circle, and then we're putting an example in here to show how we would solve that type of question. So this is where, you need to refer to other materials. You're not just going to know this on the top of your head because we're reviewing. So you could look at your trig diagnostic here that you just took. What I'm going to do is look back through some old assessments. So your Unit 3 assessment is going to be a really good resource for your final because it has all the types of questions from Unit 3. Right away I see 2 says find the point on the unit circle determined by the angle 140 degrees. So that's, it has the word unit circle in it. It's probably about the unit circle. Some other options, other assessments that I'm going to use are problem sets. So you have anything that says 7 point something is from Unit 3 because we use Chapter 7 in the book. So these are all of your Unit 3 problem sets, 7 point something, are going to be something to do with the unit circle. Okay, and then I also see here I have mark the following angles on you. So I have a few. I'm going to go for the Unit 3 assessment. Okay. So I'm just going to go with this. And let me highlight this. How do I spot a unit circle problem? How do I solve a unit circle problem? For the vast majority of these problems, it will say the word unit circle in it. Another key word that you'll see a lot in these types of problems are, like you can see in question 6, you'll see coordinates. So whenever you see coordinates, you're probably going to be doing something with a unit circle. Another thing to look out for would be like if you have a blank something comma something. That's a common thing that you'll see on the final. And then you'll always usually be given an angle. Sometimes the angle will be in degrees and sometimes the angle will be in radians. Okay, and for how to use circle problems, you really don't remember how to solve unit circle problems, you can always refer to the study playlist, which is linked to the homepage. That's going to be a really helpful resource for you as you fill out your study guide. You could also Google your own help videos. You could, like on your problem sets, if you have more of your own, back at that. I remember I think the key fact that I'll need to remember for these problems, which I'm going to write here, is that for any point on the unit circle, x comma y, the x-coordinate corresponds to the cosine of that angle, and the y-coordinate corresponds to the sine of that angle. And then the other key thing to remember is if the angle is given to me in radians, then I have to convert radians into degrees before I can plug the angle into cosine and sine. So I'm going to add a side note. Okay, so already, I know there's a lot going on here, but already I can see this kind of key fact that I need to know. That's something I'm going to want to immediately put over here on my cheat sheet on the other page because I have to know. So I can start to form my cheat sheet. So my formulae to memorize, otherwise known as put kind of that key. I also can see that some cases I'm gonna want to either like Google that equation or look back at my notes to find the equation for converting radians to degrees. A helpful place to look for this would be on, like, if you remember for a while we were doing like essential question reflections back in Unit 3. So like here on Wendy's essential question reflection, one of the questions is how do we convert radian measures to degrees? And she said you convert radian measures to degrees by using the equation r times 180 over pi, and then you convert degrees to radians by using the equation d equals pi over 180. So I'm going to put those two, I'm going to put that equation in my cheat sheet. Degrees equals radians times 180 over pi. As well. And then radians equals degrees times pi over 80. Now I'm going to look back at the question I had highlighted previously that I thought corresponded to this learning target. I'm first going to just copy this question down. This is a question in Okay, I know I'm looking for an xy coordinate. I know the x-coordinate's going to correspond to the cosine of 140 degrees. The y-coordinate's going to correspond to the sine of 140 degrees. I'm going to plug these into my calculator and get negative 0.766.643. So I'm going to separately plug in the cosine of 140 and then separately plug in the sine of 140 into my calculator. Okay, and then let's quickly pick a problem on the unit circle in radians and solve it below. So I'm going to find one on the Unit 3 assessment that's in radians. I know radians have a pi in them. Radians have a pi in them. So it looks like I'm going to be looking for cosine 2 pi over 3. So the first thing I have to remember is to convert 2 pi over 3 into radians. So I'm going to use my equation here. If I'm going from convert 2 pi over 3 into degrees. So if I'm going from radians to degrees, I'm going to use this equation. Degrees equals radians times 180 over pi. Let's write that down. Degrees equals radians, times 180 over pi. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 2 pi over 3 times 180 over pi. And I'm going to get 360 pi over 3 pi. The pi's cancel out, and 360 divided by 3 is 120 degrees. So now I know what I'm really finding is the cosine of 120 degrees. And I can go ahead and plug the cosine of 120 degrees into my calculator, and I will get negative 0.5. So the second step would be plug into your calculator. Okay, so that's an example of how to fill out your study guide for key concept number 1. What you're going to be doing for the next bit of class is you're going to be filling out your study guide for the rest of the key concepts that will be on the exam. Again, this is really a practice in going back into your old assessments and handouts, finding relevant problems, and then putting them into your study guide so you can easily access these problems. Also, just the process of filling out the study guide is actually studying, as I'm sure you realize. Okay, so as you're organizing your folder, the first thing in your folder should be your study guide, and then any problems that you use in your study guide, I want you to put that assessment or that handout also in your selecting these folders on to study. So my Unit 3 assessment, I used a problem from that, and I also used a problem from this problem set, so I'm going to put that behind as well. And then make sure you highlight the question that you used. So for example, I used question 2 here. I want to make sure that question that I put into my study guide is highlighted in here. Of the key concepts in here. You're going to have a practice test next class where I'll be checking your study guide. You'll be able to use your study guide in the practice test, and I'll also be doing a binder check. All right, thank you.